I want to teach women how to think. When I'm gone, right, and their process is over, and I've moved on to help somebody else, and they're entering that next chapter, I want them to be able to think, okay, Rhonda told me, or, oh, hey, I can ask good questions. I don't have to know all the answers, right? But if I can help them to think, I've now empowered them for a lifetime.
Welcome to the Drama-Free Divorce Podcast. I'm your host, attorney and mediator, Cary Jacobson. Each week, we bring you practical guidance, real conversations, and expert insights to help you navigate divorce with clarity, confidence, and less conflict. If you're ready for a calmer, more empowered path forward, you're in the right place. Welcome back. I'm your host, Cary Jacobson, attorney, mediator, and advocate for helping families navigate divorce with clarity and confidence. Today, we're exploring the topic that's both powerful and essential, empowering women with financial confidence through divorce. Too often, women feel uncertain about their financial future after divorce. Maybe they weren't the ones managing the household finances. Maybe they just don't know where to start. Today's guest reminds us you don't have to walk this journey alone. Joining me today is Rhonda Noordyk, the founder and CEO of Financial Divorce Advocate and host of Disrupting Divorce Conversations for Women podcast, and also a best-selling author. Since founding her company in 2014, Rhonda has helped more than 900 women build clarity, strength, and long-term financial security through divorce. Rhonda, I am so thankful that you are here to this show today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. As I just went through your bio, you have had an impressive career through the financial industry, and you were, in my understanding, also teaching college level, and now you have founded the Financial Divorce Advocate. What inspired you to create that company that is so now focused on the divorce process?
Yeah, it's interesting. So looking back, 2014, I had a woman walk through my doors and she said, Rhonda, this process is an open purse. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I've worked for the same company. I've been married to the same person. I've lived in the same house for 25 years. And she said, and now I'm going through divorce and I've had to get a second job just to pay for the legal fees. She said, Rhonda, there just has to be a better way. She was having this internal cognitive dissonance that many of my clients, and I'm sure many of yours have, which is I want to be able to show up if they're working or whatever they're doing it as their best self. And she felt like she wasn't able to be as committed to her full-time endeavors because she was needing to essentially moonlight to cover the legal fees. And I left that conversation really saying, listen, there has to be a better way. And so that was part of the conversation in my own mind of, okay, how do we make this process better for women?
Yeah. And that is similar to the, experience that I've had, working with clients in the traditional space and the litigation and all that brings, and realizing both for myself and for my clients that there also has to be a better way. And so I think that so many of us have realized that this traditional way of getting divorced is not beneficial for anyone. And we're all trying to rewrite the script on how it should go. So I appreciate that you also saw that need. When you're helping women not only understand their numbers, but also feel informed about their decisions, how do you go about doing that, especially for those who may not have been in that CFO role in their household?
Yeah, so a lot of times when women reach out, they are feeling disempowered. They maybe haven't handled the finances for years, sometimes decades. They have been listening to the narrative of, well, don't worry, I've got it. Or, oh, you're not smart enough, or I don't pay you to think, or a host of others that I've heard that are just so unsettling. And so I always want women to know, listen, at the end of the day, you are smart. The formula for confidence at the end of the day is simple. It's knowledge plus experience is what gives us the confidence. So if we have the knowledge without the experience, it's theory. If we have the experience without the knowledge, it's trial and error. But when we get the two of them working together, we can see women's confidence grow exponentially in oftentimes a relatively short period of time. So, that for me is really providing them that step-by-step guidance around how to best do that. And thankfully, over the last 11 years, I have had the opportunity to be in the trenches with these women and see the impact that somebody believing in them or asking them the right questions or telling them, you're not crazy, and let's look at this. And at the end of the day, Cary, I want to teach women how to think. Because when I'm gone, right, and their process is over, and I've moved on to help somebody else, and they're entering that next chapter, I want them to be able to think, okay, Rhonda told me, or, oh, hey, I can ask good questions. I don't have to know all the answers, right? But if I can help them to think, I've now empowered them for a lifetime.
Absolutely. And knowing that they can find the answer, even if they don't know it, it's, one of my biggest things is knowing that there are people out there to find the answer and figuring out how to find those people, because the resources are there. It's just a matter of locating them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because, when I first started, and I'm sure it's similar for you as well, like there wasn't this emphasis on having a team of people. Like I was one of the first people, right, in my particular area for sure that was like, you need a team of people. We need the legal, we need the financial, we need the emotional, working together. And so I was building, these resources. I was building communities before people were even doing it. Now we see a lot more of it. So now what I'm seeing, right, as I'm sure you are too, is we went from having hardly any information about divorce to having a plethora of information. And now the challenge is paring it down. So I always believe that more information is not always better, because then you're, as the individual, having to siphon through, right, what's true, what's not, what's accurate, what's the best step. So having a way to be able to help people navigate through that, to say, listen, let me help you vet these pieces. Right. And to your point, finding the right team of people, the way that I've always said we go through that is what I call the CIA method, which is you need to find somebody who has good communication, that they're timely, they're respectful, they're not emailing you in all caps, they're not giving you short answers without actually asking your question. Number two, you need somebody who has integrity. And then the last piece is you need somebody who's going to advocate. And when you get all of those pieces working together, it really helps facilitate, that process moving forward, which what this is all about.
Yeah, I like that. That's a nice way of thinking through the traits that you're looking for in a professional.
Yeah.
One thing that I see often, especially from women who are coming into the process, doing that initial consultation, is obviously fear. Fear of the unknown is huge. I think so many women put off divorce for a long time, simply because they don't know what the next step is going to be. And also being fearful of not being able to financially be okay after the divorce. What do you say to those clients that come to you feeling that way?
Well, the very first thing I tell them is to breathe. Not super financial, but we just have to take a breather, right? And then I will say, listen, you know what? At the end of the day, we can't do anything about all of the things that have happened in the past. We have an opportunity now. And I want to make sure that we're leveraging this process as much as we can to help them to be able to lean into their numbers. The numbers can be their BFF, right? That they are smart enough and that they can do it. So I think a lot of times a lot of that fear is based in not having information or having inaccurate information. So one of the examples that comes to mind is, and this was very early on in my career, I had a woman who said, Rhonda, my credit score is terrible. And I said, okay, well, what is it? And she goes, I don't know, like 480. I'm like, okay, well, how do we find out what it really is instead of projecting on ourselves that it's 480, right? So she goes in, we go through this process. And then anybody who's done that, like you sit down and you're like waiting for the answer and you can feel being unsettled about it, but she did it. And her credit score was 620. Now, that is a far cry from 480, a game changer, in fact. And so at the end of the day, I think that we as women, a lot of times are carrying around these, like, I can't afford it. I can't do this. I can't invest in what I need to get a good result for my divorce, blah, blah, blah. And we've got a lot of head trash and a lot of fear without actually having the information. Like the other thing that I'm sure you probably see as well is a lot of times people will be told, hey, you can't keep the house. And I'm like, okay, well, based on what? Because 99% of my clients can keep the house if they want to. But a lot of times after crunching the numbers, taking a very practical approach, right, and looking at this from all different angles, they realize, well, I could, but maybe it's not in my best interest. And now they're empowered to make the decision instead of feeling like everybody's telling them that they can't and they don't even really understand why.
Yeah, I think people do, especially women, tell themselves these stories, and we often put ourselves in these negative situations and tell ourselves these negative stories. And then it is learning more, about what the options are and what their choices are so that they can make the informed decision. And that, I think, is the most critical part, is giving them the knowledge so that they can make an informed decision based on what's going to be in their best interest and what's going to be in the best interest of their family.
Absolutely.
I love that approach. And I know it's not about knowing everything. It's really helping them know and be willing to learn about what are the right questions to ask. As you mentioned before, sometimes it's all about, there can be a lot of information and the right resources to ask, as well as the right questions to ask. So what are some actionable steps that you tell women to start with when they are starting that divorce process to protect their financial well-being? I think people do, especially women, tell themselves these stories, and we often put ourselves in these negative situations and tell ourselves these negative stories. And then it is learning more about what the options are and what their choices are so that they can make the informed decision. And that, I think, is the most critical part, is giving them the knowledge so that they can make an informed decision based on what's going to be in their best interest and what's going to be in the best interest of their family.
Absolutely.
I love that approach. And I know it's not about knowing everything. It's really helping them know and be willing to learn about what are the right questions to ask. As you mentioned before, sometimes it's all about, there can be a lot of information and the right resources to ask, as well as the right questions to ask. So what are some actionable steps that you tell women to start with when they are starting that divorce process to protect their financial well-being?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple things. The first thing I will say is it's not sexy and it's not glamorous, but we have to start with a budget. The reason that I suggest that they start with trying to get a handle on current expenses if they can. If they can't, then we start looking at projected expenses, looking at those expenses that they may have that they don't currently have, so we can kind of start to get our arms around that. And there's a couple reasons I suggest that we start with that. One is because if women don't have access to financial documents or statements, this is something that we can be working on in the interim that will help them feel empowered. The second thing is it helps with them reframing these narratives. Like, well, Rhonda, I think I'm going to have to live in a one-room efficiency apartment in a bad neighborhood. Okay, well, is that really true? Or is that what you're, catastrophically thinking that's going to be true? So when we crunch the numbers and I give them a range, like, hey, based on what I'm seeing, here's the range. If you were to go out and either acquire a property, get a mortgage, or you're looking at rent, here's what I want you to stay within. Now, when they're out looking, guess what? They can make decisions faster because I've given them the framework in which to make those decisions. And I always tell women, like, hey, at the end of the day, I can't guarantee that this process is going to be faster for you. But what I can promise is that you'll make decisions faster, that women can make decisions faster. And that's where the empowerment comes, rather than, I'm not really sure, I'm feeling unsettled, I don't want to move forward. And then they feel stuck. And so that's what they do. And they're able to make decisions faster. And they're like, holy cow, this is awesome. And I'm feeling empowered. So it's step by step through that process. And then the other piece of it is also, it's important to have a good understanding of the expenses, because then when we have the conversation about support and we say, okay, well, what is the amount of income that needs to be coming in from multiple sources? It might be coming in from child support, from and or alimony. It may be coming in from part-time or full-time work, and it may be coming from other investments, whether it's rental properties, investment, dividends, etc. So that helps really kind of bring that in as well, because a lot of times women think, well, I'm going to have to go back to work full-time or, whatever. And so if I say, listen, based on what we're seeing, you're in the red, $500 a month, $1,000 a month, what will you need to be able to do to help, close that gap? Now they're empowered to make a decision and can feel good about making those decisions. And I always tell people when they're doing the budget, especially when there's a lot of moving parts with this, I'm like, if you're in the red, great. And they're like, what do you mean great? Because now we know what your target is. And now you can start strategizing and planning and doing what women do so well, which is possibilitizing how you're going to close that gap. And it also gives us the opportunity to also re-engage the conversation about support, because it's never black and white. The numbers in those calculations are only as good as the numbers we're putting in. And so there is usually some flexibility around where those numbers come in.
Right. Okay. I'm going to get to a very practical question. When you are working with someone to create their budgets, are you suggesting that they do so pen and paper? Or are you suggesting that they do so using any sort of technology where they can, connect their accounts and, bank accounts, credit cards, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And it really is an individual decision. I usually will take people through a 10-step process in developing their budget. So one of the very first things we do is, what do you want? Do you want paper and pen? Do you want to be able to leverage technology? Do you want to keep track in an Excel spreadsheet? There's like paper, pen, Excel spreadsheet, and then interactive online tools. And it could be, really any of them, as long as they're feeling like they can stay consistent. So one of the tools that we will often use as it relates to, so we have an Excel spreadsheet, it's interactive, and that's great. We also do have some framework for the paper and pen folks, but for the interactive software component, Mint went out of business or whatever, went away a couple years ago, and that was kind of like my go-to for a lot of people. So we've now been implementing Monarch Money, which allows people to be able to have a really nice dashboard. The tricky part, though, is a lot of times, especially when people are feeling so overwhelmed, a lot of these tools have like upfront setup and upfront, energy that it takes to get it set up. So we have built it as part of our service for our clients to partner them with somebody who is helping them set that up. So they do it in a 1-hour session, they get it set up, and it's never a one and done, but at least it's moving in the right direction where they can start to really kind of analyze what's coming in and what's going out. Obviously, there are other banks and things that have some of those connections too, but Monarch Money has been a fan favorite as it relates to budgeting.
Yeah. Well, I always think it's helpful for people to know what the options are so that they can kind of decide what's going to be a best fit for them. And I'm a huge person that looks to leverage technology where possible instead of digging through all of the credit card statements and the bank statements. So I think that even though there is that setup time, it can ultimately be a time saver, because it oftentimes will categorize those things so that you can see, I'm spending this much for utilities, or I'm spending this much for shopping, or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I love so much about your message is that it's not just about surviving the divorce process, it's also about thriving, especially on the other side of it. Can you talk more about what that means for you and your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the reason that I keep doing this work, right? I've said, listen, at the end of the day, if I lose the passion for seeing the transformation of women going from anxious to exhilarated, or from, overwhelmed to empowered, it's time for me to do something else, right? And so for me, as much as it is about making sure that they're okay after the fact, I want, again, that transformation of them being able to think more clearly, not be intimidated by the numbers, know how to ask really good questions. I mean, one of the things that I've done over the years when I've been in financially negotiating type situations is I've said, that's interesting. Help me understand. It was a simple question, right? That women can ask. You don't have to come with even very specific answers or questions. It's, hey, help me understand why you're recommending that, or help me understand that concept. And what I've found over the years is people are usually pretty willing to share how much they know. If we ask just a really simple question. So yeah, the transformation's been huge. And, at the end of the day, it's the transformation, it's empowering them beyond the divorce, it's helping them leave a legacy, it's helping them take risks. I think that's another part. Like, women are afraid to invest in themselves. They're afraid to invest in people that can help them. And at the end of the day, their male counterparts are not doing that. They're like, hey, I want an expert, boom. And then they move on. So I think we as women need to get out of the 70s mindset of, hey, I need a male cosigner to make a decision. No, we are smart. And when we surround ourselves with the right people, we can make good decisions. And it is okay for us to take on some risk, because what we're doing through this process is helping make decisions about buying a car or buying a house or investing in a business or whatever it might be. These are training grounds for that. And if we really want to shape the conversation that women are having with themselves, right, about money, we need to start getting uncomfortable and doing it anyways, putting on a little bit more deodorant and making it happen, because that's where we're at, right? And so I think we got to get out of that 70s mindset and be empowered to make decisions, because we can, and we can do it very well.
When you are working with clients, do you kind of work with them as they're going through litigation, if they're doing settlement negotiations, preparing them for mediation? Is it all of those, some of those? How do you work with women who are going through this process?
So great question. So I work with them one-on-one. I also facilitate a group program that we offer, again, tapping into my college facilitation and adjunct faculty days. I've created a curriculum, so it's a hybrid where I'm walking them through the process and then teaching them some core concepts on how to vet professionals, how to be looking at things through discovery and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that people have the right process. So I do work a lot with clients that are in litigation. I do a lot with mediation support and preparation. I also, if they're doing collaborative, can support them there. And I am also advocating to be in mediation. So I just did one in the state of Oregon where I got approval to be in the courtroom virtually to be the financial expert with my client. And it was a game changer, because the attorney mediator said, I have never seen that before. And I said, well, that's why I'm here, right? Like, tapping into my experience around the financials is really valuable. And unfortunately, there was some misinformation that was flying around because, again, you've got, the legal aspect and they're really good at that. But the financial stuff, sometimes they're a little bit out of touch with the details that really do make a difference. And so being able to work together as a team is extremely valuable.
As an attorney, 100% agree. And as a mediator, having the financial expert can be so valuable, because there's a lot that we glean about things over, years of experience, but not many of us are experts on the tax consequences, which is always a huge one, or, capital gains issues, and all of the things that you all as financial professionals really are the experts at. And it can be so valuable to have you guys as part of that team, whether it's negotiating a settlement or prepping a client prior to mediation. I have not had a scenario where I've had an advocate financial in a mediation, but I've had scenarios where I've co-mediated with another financial professional, so they were able to touch base on those financial issues. So great ways to utilize financial experts.
It is. It's a matter of finding what role people are going to play. I think even as the advocate, I've always told people my job is to be able to help, obviously, advocate for my client, but I'm not going in there to tick people off. I mean, a lot of times what ends up happening is I come out of it like, oh my gosh, that was awesome. And so it doesn't have to be adversarial. There's a way to do it that can be kind and respectful and helpful, because my job as the advocate is to help the person who is usually in that disempowered role understand what's being presented so we can get it over the finish line.
And educating that person so that they can make the informed decisions. Rhonda, thank you so much for joining me today for all of your incredible work and what you're doing to empower women and move forward with confidence. To learn more about Rhonda and Financial Divorce Advocate, be sure to visit her website, financialdivorceadvocate.com. Tune into her podcast, Disrupting Divorce: Conversations for Women. And if you're going through a divorce and are looking for a peaceful, informed approach, visit our website, jacobsonfamilylaw.com, and learn more about how mediation and collaborative divorce can help you move forward with clarity and peace. Thanks for joining us, and be sure to subscribe and tune in next time for more lessons, stories, and insights from the world of divorce and family law. Thanks for listening to the Drama-Free Divorce Podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to follow, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs it. For more resources or to work with us, visit jacobsonfamilylaw.com. Until next time, stay grounded, stay informed, and stay drama-free.